if you get side of truck, the way it's broken down on that paperwork that I gave you guys, the side of truck also includes all that stuff underneath the truck. Not the fifth wheel pieces. The fifth wheel and all the fifth wheel parts are included in coupling. Everybody has to do coupling. But for side of truck, it's everything along the side of the truck and all the brake and suspension and wheel and tire parts underneath it. Okay? So, for side of truck, you start here at the mirror and the bracket. Make sure that mirror and that mirror bracket are securely mounted to the door or the truck, whatever you want to say. Make sure that bracket and that mirror are not broken or damaged in any way. Make sure the door is securely mounted, it's not damaged, it opens and closes properly. The hinges on the door are secured the way they should be. Make sure you tell him you're going to check that seal around the inside of that door and make sure it is intact. Okay? Then, you check the fuel tank and the fuel cap. You're going to check that entire fuel tank, making sure you have no dents or no cracks or damage in it. And you're going to make sure that you don't have any fuel leaking anywhere out of either that fuel tank or that fuel cap, and that fuel cap is on tight and secure. Okay? Then, tell him I'm going to check all my steps and catwalks everywhere on this truck. I've got to make sure they're solid, they're securely mounted, and they do not have any debris in them. If you want to say free of debris, that'd be fine. Then you move back here. You're going to tell him about the frame first and foremost. Doesn't matter where you start. Frame, not cracked, not bent. Tell him you're going to check all your cross members. Don't worry about trying to count them. Just tell him I'm going to check all my cross members, making sure they're not bent, broken, loose, or missing. I'm going to check that entire exhaust system, which I missed yesterday morning. I'm going to make sure that entire exhaust system is tight and secure, and I don't see any holes, dents, or cracks in that exhaust system indicating leaks of any kind. Drive shaft. I've got to tell him that drive shaft is not cracked, bent, or twisted. Again, if you say no damage of any kind, that'll cover it. And I've got to make sure the universal joints at each end of that drive shaft are tight and free of any kinds of debris. So once again, that right there is the brake hose you need to be concerned with. Tell him the fittings at each end of that brake hose are secure and they're not leaking. The hose itself is not cut or frayed or leaking. Down here at this end of it, once again, you have a brake chamber. If on a couple of those trucks over there, they're harder to see, you may not think about mentioning them unless you get down on one knee and look under there and see them. That brake chamber has to be securely mounted. Remember, not cracked, dented, or leaking. No loose or missing clamps. The slack adjuster, right up over here. Again, they're really hard to see under the truck in this configuration. You got to tell him that slack adjuster is securely mounted. Both the slack adjuster and the push rod, once again, no bent, broken, loose, or missing parts. And from here back, you got to tell him when you pull on that slack adjuster, that push rod cannot move more than 1 inch with the brakes released. From here back, if you forget to say with the brakes released, he won't give you the point for it. Brake drums, no holes, no dents, no cracks. Brake lining, or brake shoe if you will, not worn too thin. No evidence at all of any oil or grease on either the brake drum or the brake lining. Spring hangers. I'm going to check any spring hangers I have. I'm going to make sure they're not cracked or damaged. They don't have any missing nuts or bolts. I'm going to make sure that bushing right there in the center of it is not damaged or missing. This is a leaf spring. If it was round or square, it would be a torsion bar. If it's a torsion bar, you got to tell him it's securely mounted. It's not cracked or damaged, or not cracked or bent, whatever you want to say. But this is a leaf spring. So just like the leaf springs on the front of the truck, you got to tell him they're not broken, missing, or shifted. If it's got leaf springs, even if it's got a torsion bar, it's going to have U-bolts. Make sure those U-bolts are not broken, loose, or missing. If you can see it from here, if it's bright enough outside and you got some daylight shining between those tires, oh, I see an airbag right back there. If you see an airbag, you've got to tell him the mount for that airbag. It's secure, it's not cracked or damaged. The airbag itself is not cracked or leaking, and it's going to have a shock absorber on it if it's got an airbag especially. Tell him the shock is securely mounted and it's not leaking either. But you're going to want to look in there and actually see if those components are there before you mention them. If they're not there and you mention them, he's going to know you don't know what the hell you're talking about. But if they are there and you miss them, those are points that you're leaving on the table. Remember, you're trying to rack up as many points as possible. So you can afford to miss a thing here or there, provided you don't miss too many things. You follow me? Because if you've got a small section of the truck, you miss 4 or 5 things, you might drop out of that 80% range. So you got to try and rack up as many points as possible. So leaving points on the table unnecessarily because you forgot to mention something, that could hurt you at the end. So, tires, all 4 sidewalls, no cracks, no damage. Even wear on the surface of this tire, a minimum of or no less than 2 32nds of an inch tread depth. The only one that has to be 4 32nds is the steering axle. Everything else has to be 2 32nds. Valve stems and caps on both wheels, not broken, damaged, or missing. You're going to use an air pressure gauge at that point to check the air pressure in both tires, making sure they're properly inflated to manufacturer's specs. Since this is a dual set of wheels, you got to make sure the bud spacing between these wheels is even all the way around. You have no damage or debris wedged in there. And if you see a spacer, y'all look right here a minute. Y'all see how these 2 sets of these wheels are like 2 ends of a bell, the way they touch each other? You see what I'm talking about? Those 2 concave looking sort of where the 2 sections of the wheel meet. If you look in there and it's flat, okay, you don't see those 2 shapes like that, like 2 bottoms of a pear touching each other. If you look in there and it's flat, that's going to be a spacer. If you see a spacer, you've got to tell him you're going to make sure that spacer is not broken, damaged, or rusting through. If you don't see a spacer, all you got to worry about is the space and no debris and no damage. But if you see a spacer, you got to say not broken, damaged, or rusting through. So then, moving out, once again, that rim, just like in the front, you got to make sure it's not cracked, it's not bent. You see no signs of any illegal welds. You're going to check the lug nuts, making sure first that they're all present, and they're not missing. And you're going to make sure they appear tight and not loose because you see no shiny threads or rust trails showing. You've also got to tell him you're going to check each and every one of those lug nut holes in that wheel, making sure there's no cracks and no damage. After that, this axle seal, all you got to tell him is that's securely mounted, not leaking. You're never going to see a sight glass in a setup like that. Okay. So, both those 2 trucks over there are single axle trucks. Again, if one of those tears up for some reason, and we have to take this one over there, it's going to have a tandem axle. If it does, tell him I would check that axle just like I check this axle. Not necessary to do it all, because if you nailed it on this one, the assumption is you're going to nail it on that one. However, as you go to move past it, if you suddenly realize there's an airbag that you did not mention because you couldn't see it from the front, tell him about it then. He'll add the points to it. Okay? Even after you finish the end cab, if you get out and think of anything that you forgot to say on whatever part of the truck you're doing, he'll add the points to it then. Okay? Provided you do it after you finish the end cab. If you're getting out and you've done the side of the truck, and say, oh, and there's an airbag under there, blah, 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 and he'll add the points to your total, okay? You can do it that jacked up and that far out of order as long as you mention it during that, testing phase. Don't just say, okay, I'm done, or whatever, if you missed anything. So, when you get to the back of the truck, mud flap and bracket, securely mounted, not damaged. Then you got to tell him about all the lights, all the reflectors, and the reflective tape on the back of the truck. Tell him I'm going to check my taillights, my left and right turn signals, my four-way flashers, my brake lights, and any reflectors I got on the back of this truck. Again, you got to, yeah.
Which one is reflectors?
Do what?
Reflectors, which one is
Reflectors.
Well, anything on, well, if you think about it, they can have reflectors on the back. This one may not have any necessarily, but you're just going to, actually, it does
Well, I
have.
got two of them.
Actually, it does have reflectors.
Yeah.
One there, one down.
You don't have to point them out to him. Just tell him which one, what you
Right.
would check. So again, condition is first. Clean, not broken, not missing. And then color. Every light and reflector on the back of this truck is going to be red. You've also got to tell him additionally, I'm going to make sure all this reflective tape is present. Now, it would seem to me that if you're mentioning reflectors, hey, but it doesn't. Reflective tape is something separate. You got to tell him the reflective tape is present. That's where side of truck ends. It includes everything from that mirror, all the brakes and wheels and suspension, and comes right back here to the back.